Samdai, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cambodia Economic Growth Policy Dialogue on National TV, Cambodia National TV. Today, it is really the inaugural session, and I have the pleasure to have with me as my special guest Ambassador Derek Yip, who is the Australian ambassador to the Kingdom of Cambodia. The idea behind this policy dialogue is all about how do the international community, how do the private sector, how do the academic community perceive Cambodia economic policy that, in this context, how do we look at our policy? How do we see the implementation of our policy? How does the private sector react to our policy? And hopefully with a discussion from a diverse group of guests from academia, from the ambassador corps, from the private sector, we could have their perspective on how we see our implementation, how do we formulate future policy in the context of, say, for example, a few years from now when we graduate from the least developed country, how do we formulate this policy in the future when we're talking about the Vision 2050? How do we design? And these are the sort of dialogue that I hope from the variety of speakers who come to this program, we could get inspired, we could get some idea from them, and hopefully we can design a good policy for the benefit of Cambodia, also for the benefit of ASEAN as a region, as well as the larger global community. So once again, I'd like to welcome you, Ambassador. Welcome to our inaugural session. Let me start by saying that for Australia, Cambodia consider Australia as a strategic and trusted partner, whether it's from the government or from the civil society or from the academic world. We always look at Australia as a reliable partner. Of course, our relation go ways back, and I can say that when we have working on the Paris Peace Accord, the famous colonel who came to lead the Peace Corps was from Australia. So anyway, Ambassador, what's your take?
Thank you, Excellency Dr. Siphana. It's a real privilege to be here with you today. And thank you for the generous words about the relation between Australia and Cambodia. You're absolutely right. We have a very, very strong and long-standing history between two of our countries. We established diplomatic relations in 1952, so that's a year before Cambodia declared independence. But we have had a very strong history for a number of reasons. The first one is, going back to I think some of the more tragic periods of Cambodia's history. We had around 13,000 Cambodian refugees moving to Australia between 1975 and 1986. That was around the time of the Khmer Rouge period and the conflict that came afterwards. But, these communities brought with them stories, these excellent experiences of resilience, of optimism, of hope. And they really have integrated so well into the Australian community. They have added so much to our social fabric. I was very privileged about late last year to have one of these Cambodian Australians return to Cambodia, and we hosted her for a visit in Alice Pool. And her family is really a fantastic example of how this has happened. Her family moved to Australia in the early 1980s, and they moved to Melbourne. And her family, like many migrant families, started a small business. Her parents started an electronics store in Melbourne, and she studied really hard at high school, and then went to read law at Melbourne University, and then became a barrister, and then became an award-winning author. Right? And so you have many of these people who have come to Australia with hope and optimism, and really have had the opportunity to succeed, and that creates these really strong bonds between our two people. So that's one example. The other thing also comes back to the tragic period in Cambodia, which you mentioned. We, at the time, had two foreign ministers who really led a lot of the diplomatic work that Australia did regionally. Bill Hayden and then Gareth Evans.
Yes.
So they led a lot of the very proactive, creative diplomacy, which led to the ability to have a framework that led to the Paris Peace Agreements and then the United Nations Transitional Authority. So that was a time that we look back on with a lot of pride, with a lot of fondness, because that was a time where Australia really recognised the importance of peace and stability in the region, where it looked at foreign policy through very compassionate eyes, and really led some very proactive actions that helped contribute to peace and stability here in Cambodia. And you mentioned Lieutenant General John Sanderson.
Yes.
He was the force commander for UNTAC, and we had several hundred Australian soldiers and police officers as well as part of the Transitional Authority. So that's something that I think has started giving us a very good grounding here in Cambodia, and it's great to be able to, in some ways, benefit from the legacy of this.
Yes. Well, I mean, if you fast forward from 1991, 93, that was the peace period time. Now it's about more than 30 years, and I would say the legacy, the contribution of the Australian peacekeeper, the legacy of Australia as a whole in terms of a development partner. Because at that time, we emerged from the war, we emerged from absolute, I would say, poverty, and we are rebuilding our society. And I would say, had it not been for the international community, had not been in this case for Australia, playing a good role as a good partner to help us rebuild our society, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I think this is something that we owe gratitude to Australia. But I think that foremost is the people-to-people relationship that I think, and your example have illustrated that is really the bond between the two countries. And I would say ultimately it is them who will make our relation more alive, more rich, and it will serve as the basis for future economic development of the country.
Absolutely. I think, we rely on our migrant communities a lot to be able to forge business links. And I think we've seen some of that as well. But it's also what migrant communities bring to Australia in terms of diversity, in terms of openness that we really do treasure. You spoke about the post-peace period process, the post-peace process period.
Yes.
I think that's really important. So we're obviously very proud of the involvement that we had with Cambodia in peacemaking and peacekeeping.
Yes.
But of course, you mentioned all of the reconstruction work and the nation building work that went in after that. And that was something that Australia was very heavily involved in. Since the UNTAC period, we've contributed around $2 billion Australian dollars in development assistance. Very early on, we were focused on things like building infrastructure. So we contributed to the construction of around 1,200 kilometres of road and bridges here in Cambodia. We also engaged in agricultural programs to be able to help farmers to increase incomes. So we did a lot of things like also subsidizing healthcare and increasing healthcare coverage. So that was some very early work that we did. But of course, Cambodia has developed rapidly. Just before this interview, we were looking out over the skyline and saying, how much it's changed. And when a country develops, when its people become wealthier, the needs change. And the challenges also change. And so we've tried very hard as a country to be flexible, to be dynamic in how we cooperate with Cambodia. And a lot of the work that we do now in Cambodia is very much focused on supporting economic growth, economic diversification, agricultural productivity. We're looking at things like healthcare systems improvement. We're looking at dealing with climate change, clean energy transition. So, as the needs change, we change our engagement as well.
Right. I would say the basis of sustainability, you can say that is a lot to do with, again, people. And one of the best example is the Australian education system. I think over the last 20 years, we have about 20-some thousand of Cambodian alumni who want to study high school, university, have a bachelor, a master, even some PhD. And well, me, I'm an alumni of Australia. I have my PhD there. My daughter have a Juris Doctor from University of Sydney. So I think these are some element that I feel in terms of the economic nation building, the reconstruction, access to an educated workforce is very, very important. And foremost, in terms of relation with Australia, when Australian company come to Cambodia, they say, look, there's about some 20,000 Cambodia who knew Brisbane, who knew Melbourne, who knew Sydney. I could tap them, and then they can just easily, enter the workforce there. So education is definitely one area that I see the strength of Australia. Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, the one if I was to pick one thing I love the most about the job, it's really engaging with Cambodian alumni. Right, we've spent time studying in Australia. I've heard different figures, up to 27,000, up to 30,000 alumni. But I know that at every point in time, we have around 4,800 to 5,000 Cambodian students studying in Australia.
Yes.
And that's a mix of tertiary education, but also TVET, LE-COS, which is English language training, and also high school and primary school. And the thing about this is, yes, they get access to a world-class education.
Yes.
Yes, they get access to an education that's very much focused on innovation, on strong research, but they also get to learn about Australia.
Yeah.
They get to learn about us. They get to learn about our values. They get to learn about how we think and see the world. They also get to learn about our capabilities.
Yes.
And we get to learn the same about Cambodia.
Yeah.
So we learn about your rich cultural heritage. We learn about your history. And we learn about the dynamism, the youth of the population here. I think that really helps in terms of economic connections because Cambodians who return not only bring back skills to develop the Cambodian economy, but they bring back knowledge of how can we work best with Australia.
Yes.
And that's something I think is so invaluable.
I think it's all about exposure. There's a different when you visit as a tourist for 2 weeks when compared to somebody who are immersed for 7 years to do a PhD or a master there. He or she is exposed to a way of life, a culture, a mode of thinking, and they got to see, the environment where they can grow. And when they come back, of course, that influence come along with them. I want to touch a bit more on, Australia's contribution to the economic aspect of it. As you know now, we are working quite hard to diversify our market. And Australia is, like Cambodia, we're part of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And this is something that I see is a source of growth. It's for the future of Cambodia. Having access to good economy, is very important. ASEP have Australia, New Zealand, China, Japan, Korea, and of course with the other 9 ASEAN country. But what is your perspective on this ASEP or from the market perspective?
So I think very similar to Cambodia, we have maybe 2 or 3 very, very big economic partners. In terms of export markets and sources of investment, and that's not going to change. We understand that. But we also know that having all of your eggs in one basket is not a very wise policy approach. And so a lot of the focus for the Australian government in recent decades, in recent years, has been around economic diversification.
Yes.
So we've entered into quite a number of free trade agreements or economic cooperation agreements, and regional ones, for example, ASEP, but also the ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand Free Trade Agreement.
Yes.
And so we know that when we look at the region and we look at the economies, one thing that really strikes us is how fast growing, how dynamic, how young, how vibrant economies are in Southeast Asia. And so one absolute priority for us is to diversify and increase our trade and investment links with Southeast Asia. That's why we have a Southeast Asian Economic Strategy up to 2040. That's been an initiative that we've been pursuing to be able to drive increased trade and investment, We've established trade investment teams across the region.
Yes,
We've posted what we call deals team officers out into these teams. And
your special envoy was here.
Yes, that's
2
right.
years ago or something.
That's right, as part of the ASEAN Summit. So that's Nicholas Moore, and he's been going around the place trying to encourage greater engagements as well. And we really want to try and identify investment opportunities, investment partnerships. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been doing a lot of matchmaking as well as businesses.
Yes.
But part of what helps us to enter the Southeast Asian market is really strong trade frameworks, right? And that's ASET and ANSFTA as well. So for ANSFTA, for example, the Australia, New Zealand, ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, that is such an important one for us because you have a look at this market of around 700 million people, combined GDP of around almost $4 trillion US dollars. Right, the opportunities are there.
Yeah.
And so absolutely, when we have these agreements in place, they break down trade barriers. They impose the discipline of rules, trade rules. And they help companies to identify opportunities to be able to enter markets and increase their exports. So that's absolutely fantastic.
Well, I mean, from that trade perspective, Cambodia, from the peace process, we are a young country. We barely have 30 some years of peace. In fact, it's less than that because I could say that Cambodia have full peace only after the Primes have the win-win policy, which is end of 1998. That's when the Khmer Rouge was totally disbanded and reintegrated into our society. So basically, full peace only happened about a bit more than 20 years. So it means that from this perspective, we are young entrepreneur, our private sector, they lack a lot of technical expertise. Let's face it, because to enter a market like Australia, you need high standard, which is fair because each country needs to protect their citizen, their people, their animal, their vegetation. So it's quite normal that they set a high technical standard for food, for whatever, right? So for us, it's an opportunity to access the expertise of Australia also. And that's why, to me, I think the more joint venture, the more collaboration we have with Australian company, with our local company, the better. Yeah. Because it's only, let's face it, to understand the Australian market, you need to deal with an Australian guy, right?
I think that's a really great point. We're talking about trade and investment links. So several years ago, we had a big Australian bank called ANZ.
Yes.
Investing in Cambodia through ANZ Royal.
Yes.
Right. So they brought in quite innovative ways of doing financial services.
Yes.
They brought in a lot of capabilities, and they brought in just a different way of doing business. Now, for corporate reasons, they decided then to withdraw from the Cambodian markets, and now ANZ Royal is now JTROS Royal. But what I've been really surprised about since coming into the role is that when I go and speak to people in the financial sector, the number of people I bump into who used to work for ANZ is incredible.
Yes.
Right? And one of the really fantastic things I think that Australian investment through ANZ brought was just this human resource pool. Yes. And now a lot of the people who are leaders in the financial sector in Cambodia used to work for ANZ, right? So that's a fantastic example. And we've got a more contemporary example. The largest Australian investment in Cambodia is from a company called Renaissance.
Yes.
And they operate
the gold mine.
The Okvau gold mine up in Mondulkiri.
Yes.
And I went up and had a look at the operations. And I was really, really impressed to see how technologically advanced the operations were, how low cost and sustainable they were as well. But the thing that impressed me the most was the workforce. And so they had a very strong focus on localization. So there was a lot of training, very, very important technical and skills training of local staff.
Yes.
Right? And so you bring these capabilities here through investment, and then you share those capabilities. Not only are you contributing tax, you're contributing a big investment to human capital as well.
Yeah. I think when we negotiate the accession to the WTO, Of course, Australia was quite a very strong supporter of our accession. One thing we are quite mindful that we don't have a lot of experience in many things. So we need access to technical assistance. We need access to, in those days, a lot of technical assistance. But the case you mentioned now is more a private sector, who are providing this capacity building for their own good, of course, initially, but ultimately workforce migrate. And the fact that you mentioned ANZ is a good example. I know several of the people ex-ANZ who are now having different role in different financial sector institution. But again, is the initial exposure to the way of doing business, the high standard, the ethics of doing business. These are very, very important for Cambodia to learn. And moving forward, I think I would continue to stress that company would spend more time strengthening the capacity of their workforce. Because, the world is moving fast. Now we're moving to new area, innovation, even AI. I'm an AI dummy because I don't know much about it. But all I'm saying is that whatever is coming, we need to be ready. The fourth industrial revolution, we need to be ready. And fortunately, we have a young, very savvy workforce who can deal with that much easier than us. But whatever it is, capacity strengthening is very crucial.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And I think, the Prime Minister is right in his big focus on human capital development in
Yes.
Cambodia. And that's why for us, yes, the private sector investment and the on-the-job training is really, really, really important, but governments have a role to play.
Yes.
Right? And so, one of the big focuses for us, as I was talking about in our development program here in Cambodia, is education.
Yeah.
Right? And that's primarily through the Australia Awards Scholarship Program. Now, since the early 90s, we've been able to offer around 1,000, just under 1,100 very generous scholarships, postgraduate scholarships to allow
year?
students.
Per year? No. Okay, yeah.
And we offered around 62 or 63 this year.
Okay.
But they're very generous scholarships, and they're generous because we want to make sure that not only do Cambodian students have access to world-class universities, they don't have to worry about paying their rent or have to worry about working. They can concentrate primarily on research and study.
Yes.
Right, and we've, I was really excited this year. We had, we said farewell to our second batch for 2025 just a few weeks, just last week at the MC, and there were people doing things like AI and machine learning.
Wow!
And I look at this and I go, well, Cambodia's looking at moving up the value chain.
Yes.
It's looking at economic diversification. You're looking at clean energy transition.
Yes.
You're looking at all of these things, higher value add, agro-processing. You need the workforce to be able to do that. And so a huge investment in human capital is so essential, not just to lift skills, but to actually help you to transition. And so that's been a very important focus of some of the things that we've been doing here at Human Capital Investment.
Well, I would say education is for sure is the basis. Vocational training is also very important for us. As you said, we have new industry. We have automotive assembly. We have bicycle assembly. We have electronics moving in big time now. Minibia is expanding into a new factory. But I like the way that you highlight the issue of carbon, because the future we have to move toward the zero neutral, carbon neutral approach, because if we are not taking care of the environment of our earth, what we're going to do, So I think this renewable energy is definitely on our agenda. I think it's about 60% now of our energy is renewable. Yeah. But I'm sure that Australia has a lot of experience in this clean energy.
Yeah. So yes, we are transitioning rapidly as well. I think you have very ambitious targets. I think you're going for 70% by 2030, something like that.
Yes.
So, but we've been working very
and we're on
closely.
track.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we've been working very closely with Cambodian agencies and institutions as well on the clean energy transition. So I'll give you one example. I'll give you several different examples. through our Cambodia-Australia Partnership for Resilient Economic Growth, CABRED.
Yeah.
That's our flagship economic program.
Yes.
We are working on helping to support the clean energy transition. So having a look at how you deal with variable grids, having what does a pump hydro site look like that works, in terms of the Australian experience. So we've been doing things like that, but we've also been coming back to skills, looking at some of the things that you need to be able to enable the clean energy transition. So there's a pretty ambitious EV rollout program and EV charging network program that I know is being looked at in Cambodia. But you can't just have magically a charging network. You need fleet managers for the EVs. You need technicians to be able to install and service the fast charge network. And so that requires vocational and skills training. And so we've got, for example, an Australian company that was out here last year, Bendigo Kangan Institute signed an MOU with the Ministry of Labour and Vocational Training to have a look exactly at these things. So I think there's a lot more opportunity for us to work together to look at skills, look at education, to be able to help support that transition, including clean energy.
Well, you mentioned CABRED, and I must say the body, the Trade Policy Advisory Board that I happen to chair, is a strong believer in the work of CABRED. They've been supporting us in doing a lot of good, sophisticated analysis, trade analysis. Because right now, for example, we are contemplating applying to join the CPTPP. Of course, we're still in early stage, but CABRED has been able to provide us some good analysis that we use as the basis to submit to the Prime Minister the merit of why we should, apply to join the CPTPP at some point. CABRED is also very supportive on, because I work on cashew. I happen to lead the cashew task force, and they also have very good data analysis at the micro level, right? But these are the sort of things that we, as a government, entity, it's very difficult for us to have access to good data, to good expertise. I mean, how many people can do this economic equilibrium, whatever, But these are important to have scientific evidence-based analysis as to why we should or we should not do,
So I think CABRED is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier about shifting our partnerships here into areas where Cambodia needs it the most.
Yes.
Right, so CABRED is the ultimate objective of CABRED is to support strong, resilient, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth in Cambodia. Very consistent with some of the objectives under the Pentagonal strategy. So CABRED works in a whole lot of areas. You mentioned cashews and agriculture. So they do a very vast array of things in agriculture, for example, in terms of supporting agricultural productivity, better water use, the incorporation of better soil sciences to be able to ensure that your crops are as productive and as resilient as possible. You mentioned cashews. CABRED does a lot of work on trying to encourage downstream processing. Because, for example, you've got these great cashew crops in Cambodia. They're big, they're delicious, but only 5% is processed in Cambodia.
Exactly.
Right. So part of what CABRED tries to do is encourage that downstream processing, that encourage the ability to move these products into high value markets. So cashews, for example, just a month and a half ago, I was out in Kampong Thom. This factory that CABRED has been supporting. Right? So CABRED brought about 10 Cambodian companies to the World Cashew Conference it was earlier this year. I think it was in Dubai, but I can't remember exactly. This company, Mireth, was one of them.
Mireth.
Right. So in addition to that, they've also been providing some business coaching, and they've also been helping to help them to access markets. So doing a bit of matchmaking. And there were a few MOUs signed with potential buyers, including Australian buyers, as part of the assistance that CABRED has provided. And Mireth is a really interesting example because it's a Japanese company.
Interesting.
And the Japanese government has also helped support some of the smallholder farmers who supply Mireth. So when I went to see Mireth, I also went to see some of these smallholder suppliers. and they do. They've had these new facilities constructed where they can store some of their unprocessed cashews.
Yes.
There, but they can dry them first and then store them, and it adds a bit of value, right? And then they sell it to Mirror, and that generates a bit more income.
Yeah.
It gives Mirror consistency of supply as well, and it gives the smallholder farmers a stable buy and higher prices. So it's a really great example of how partner countries can work in the same kind of area, Japan and Australia, for example, to create this really good outcomes.
Well, I like the fact that CABRAT allow us as the government ownership. And this is important because sometimes in the case of my Trade Policy Advisory Board, what we need is input, evidence-based input. Ultimately, it's us who will decide which way to go, right? But here I look at CABRAT, and as recent as early last week, we are identifying what are other market access for Cambodian product, right? And I asked CABRAT to say, can you do some good analysis? And then they say, yeah, we can provide you a set of suggestions. Up to you to decide which one you should go. And I like that approach, that they give us the space, because sometimes some agency have a tendency to say, "Well, this is good for you, do this," right? No. We feel like we want to have the ownership of the process, but it's good that we have a partner that we can open up to say, "Look, these are our concerns. These are our worries. What do you think of that?" Give you some ideas, give you some suggestions.
So we pride ourselves on being demand-driven.
Yeah.
We pride ourselves on being responsive, and CABRAT as being part of the Australian government's development program here. Has to be that.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm really heartened to hear that you say that. I know that they've been working with the advisory board on a range of things around competitiveness, around target sectors that you need to be able to focus your resources on. I know that they've been doing things around having a look at the skills base that you need, for example. So that's all excellent things, because we're not a country that will come and necessarily build freeways or build railways, right? But what we try to do is use the resources that we have to make the biggest impact possible. Right? And being able to use technical expertise, to be able to use advice, to be able to then give the Cambodian government a range of options to pursue, is a fantastic way of doing things. I'm reminded, for example, CABRAT supports every year the CDRI Economic Outlook Conference. And so that this year there was a big focus on economic diversification. Prime Minister spoke very strongly about that. And so that's one way in which we can bring policymakers, experts together to have a look at, what are the diversification pathways, what are the challenges, how do you overcome them? The other thing that CABRAT did earlier this year was they supported the visit to Cambodia by the director of the Harvard Growth Institute, Ricardo Hausman. And that was another really good example of having a look at diversification theory and strategy, and look at how can you implement that in a Cambodian context. So we like to be able to enable a good, solid, evidence-based decision making by governments.
Yeah, because from 4 years from now, we will graduate from the LDC status. It means that there'll be a certain loss of a trade preference, but it also means an opportunity to stand tall of it. From a least developed country status in less than one generation. I mean, you're talking about the peace process was only, in 1993. Really, you think about it. Now we're in position, and that's why sometimes I'm very proud of a government that we've been working hard. Less than one generation, we graduate from a least developed country. That's a big achievement. But again, it's an achievement, but it also comes with a lot of fear, a lot of concern, a lot of I would say, we used to have a good break from market access. We have all this trade preference. Now we have to compete heads on with in this case, our neighbor, because they are developing country also. So how do we increase our competitiveness? And this is where I see CABRAT could play a good role also to give us some good input on that, and up to us to afterward to think how do we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been thinking a lot about LDC graduation because I know it's something to be so proud of, but it's also creates all of these challenges, right? And so I've been talking to my team at the embassy and then in turn with Cabaret as well about how can we focus a lot of our efforts on trying to boost competitiveness, your ability to access markets competitively. And we've been looking at things like, can you do agriculture in a lower cost way? Can you incorporate agro-processing in a way that makes you more competitive? Can you access markets? And that's why we're doing a lot of things like bringing companies out into high-value markets on study tours. We're also bringing companies into Cambodia to be able to do some of that matching. But then we are also working with agricultural companies on like rice varieties, for example, that are more resilient to climate change, right? And able to capture that higher value. So that's one thing in terms of market access. The other thing that we're trying to do is reduce costs. So one of the things that I was able to do last year, CapRed supported a project at the Pasteur Institute. So they funded a lab whereby you can do a one-stop shop test for residual pesticides, for heavy metal contamination, and for antibiotics as well. Because you need to be able to provide these certifications to meet food safety standards overseas. But what companies have been doing is they've been going to multiple testing facilities to test for different things. Sometimes they even need to go overseas. And that creates this risk of cross-contamination. It also increases costs. So what we've been trying to do through the Pasteur Institute is provide this one-stop shop. It's efficient, it's probably safer in terms of them not having cross-contamination. And Cambodian companies looking to access export markets can go there, get all the testing done, get certification, and then export with confidence.
Well, another area that around what you just said, also agriculture, is basically helping us develop a agricultural industrial park. This is where the critical mass is. Because when you have a park where, say, in this case, you were talking about a cashew industrial park, you can actually have a lot of economy of scale. Because, many times when the farmer, they will sell you the nuts, right? But they throw away the apple. And at the village level, the apple is everywhere. But then I talk to industrialists, Japanese industrialists, they say, look, if you can secure us a certain amount of apple, in this case, you say 20,000 tons, we can turn into oil, marine paint, for example. But we need in one place. And having industrial park is exactly that. Brandy, cashew brandy. We have to enjoy life a bit, right? We have a local company who want to do a GI, geographical indication for brandy. Sikka. Sikka is, they start already, have a good batch of cashew. They turn to brandy already, but they want to promote as a GI. So there's so many byproducts that we can develop, provided we have a good ecosystem, a good infrastructure. And this is something that the government is quite keen. The Prime Minister is quite keen to push for that industrial zone there. And he have identified already in Kampong for that matter. And Mirat is probably one of the factory that everybody love to go and see it somewhere in the boondock. But you walk in, you think like a beautiful factory, modern, is like in the outskirts of the city, but yet somewhere in the boondock. But that is the beauty of your work,
I know CapRed's been working very closely with the royal government on some of the feasibility work around the agricultural processing industrial park. So absolutely, I think that's an area where you have a lot of prospectivity. You have all of the foundations there. You have all of the raw materials. It's a matter of actually just adding value to be able to capture, the jobs, the additional value add. I think that's efficient.
Well, Ambassador, we have a good discussion on such a broad topic of a bilateral and also multilateral aspect of it. And I want to say that these are very rich discussion. To be fair, many people out there may not know. They may hear anecdote here and there, but I don't think they have a good, I would say, over comprehensive view of our bilateral relation. And as I said in the beginning, the Cambodian government look at Australia as a strategic and trusted partner. And we want to continue nurturing that relationship, and we can grow together.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think there's a lot of goodwill
Yes.
Towards each other. There's a very strong history to build on, and there's a lot of complementarities as well.
Yes.
You know, we are a country that's very much a food producer. We're a country that's not a superpower.
Yeah.
You know, we're a country that's very trade reliant.
Yes, yes.
Similar to Cambodia, I think there's a lot of capabilities, a lot of complementarities that we can work together on towards a better future.
Yeah. I want to say thank you, Ambassador, for taking the time to have this nice, informal, very spontaneous dialogue, and I feel very enriched by our discussion. Yeah. So, like Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I like to bring this dialogue to a conclusion, and I hope that for you, the audience, some of you would find some of this discussion very helpful. Also get some information that you may not know. But all in all, I would say this relationship between Cambodia and Australia is a privileged relation. And as a member of government, I like to see this relation continue to be nurtured. And from there on, I think it's for the benefit of both our country, Australia and Cambodia. So I hope you find this session interesting, and I look forward to see you again in the next session. So thank you very much. Goodbye.